Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1.
The thinking atheist. It's not a person. It's a symbol. An idea.
The population of atheists in this country is going through the roof.
Rejecting faith. Pursuing knowledge. Challenging the sacred.
If I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth. Not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish.
And working together for a more rational world.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Assume nothing. Question everything. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Podcast. Hosted by Seth Andrews.
You are fully aware, as an Oklahoma resident, I live in Tornado Alley. And so I've been watching all the meteorologists, and they're all increasingly concerned about El Nino, right? We're seeing all the tornadoes across the Midwest and the Southwest, like 60 twisters in a single day, and they're calling it potentially one of the most tumultuous storm seasons in a decade, driven by El Nino. And of course, I'm like, what's El Nino? And so I logged on to Wondrium, and lo and behold, there's a whole series called The Science of Extreme Weather, and there it is, a section on El Nino. This is what I've been doing with my time. I've actually been streaming it via the app, listening as I'm out doing my thing, traveling, whatnot. And I'll tell you, I am just so impressed with this service, not just because Wondrium is a great supporter of this broadcast, but because there's such a good fit, so many different things to learn, thousands of hours of content, and I want you to know what I'm talking about. I want you to fall in love with Wondrium just like I have. So, they are offering a full and free month of Wondrium for you to try out with my special URL, wondrium.com/Seth. Stream it into your life on your schedule, learn new stuff, be entertained, be enlightened, and enjoy Wondrium for free for a full month. WONDRIUM.com/Seth. Wondrium.com/Seth. I was browsing a Facebook page or my feed or something, and for some reason, a local or a regional, a suburban police department notification came up. I don't subscribe, but I must have seen, Seth is in the Tulsa area, and so he might be interested. Posts you might be interested in. So it shows up on my feed, and it's a police department, an actual town police department, a suburb of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it was describing there was a collision on the highway. I think it was I-44. Two cars smashed against each other. And so there were police cars all around and emergency vehicles. And as I understand it, a semi-truck barreled through, couldn't slow down in time, through the accident scene and plowed into a police car. Fortunately, the officer was not inside. And so it struck the car, but nobody else was injured. And the police department gave a sermon and said, we are so thankful to God that the police officer was not in the driver's seat when the semi-truck smashed into it. We are very grateful there was no further injury, blah, blah, blah. And then it reiterated. And we again want to say thank you, God, for saving the life or potentially saving the life of this police officer. Well, this is a taxpayer-funded law enforcement agency that keeps talking about God. And I debated, and finally I went in and said something. I said, it's interesting to me that God didn't forewarn the people who were in the first accident that there might be danger ahead so that they could slow down or pull onto the shoulder or do something else. Avoidance, right? Divinely inspired accident avoidance seems kind of reasonable to me. Why didn't God reach down and say to the drivers involved before any accident ever happened, hey, you want to beware. You want to lower your speed. You want to take this exit, take a turn, look out for the car in red or the car in blue, or there's a narrowing or a construction site. Just FYI, danger ahead. You do not want to do this or there will be a wreck. How about the same kind of heads up for the truck driver? Hey, hang on just a second. Bunch of emergency vehicles up here. You can't see them all. You're going to plow into a police car. I think you should probably freaking slow down. I think that's reasonable. So I said something on the Facebook page to that effect, and the responses were maddening. What a dumb thing to say. I can't believe you don't understand how God works. Someone else said something totally horrible. Hang on just a second. I gotta pull this up. I normally try not to give too much attention to the trolls or the agents of awfulness, but this was so interesting that I went ahead and screen capped it. It said, Seth, God doesn't interfere with all the details. He allowed your mother's drug use while pregnant. He didn't make you an idiot. Hashtag God loves stupid people too. Hashtag it's not your fault. Hashtag poor dope babies. So his idea of a clever, intelligent retort was to say that I'm brain damaged, and the explanation must be that my mother had to have been drug addicted while pregnant with me. There was no hate like Christian love. And then finally, somebody said the inevitable, because this response always happens. Free will. Well, God didn't prevent this from happening because we have free will. Someone explain this to me. How does free will affect whether or not God would warn us about impending calamity? And I say this, I think, in several of the books that I've written. The free will argument just totally shatters the minute it is offered up. If I am given better information, then I have a better opportunity to make the free will choice. Hey, Seth, there's a left ramp and a right ramp. On the left, you're going to be more safe. On the right, you might get hit by another car, end up in the ditch, and potentially the hospital. You have the choice now, given that information. Free choice. Would you like to go left or would you like to go right? That's not an infringement of free will. It's actually capitalizing on my free choice, just giving me better information by which to make the choice. People will give me this argument when it comes to the Bible. Well, why is the Bible so nebulous and vague and contradictory? Why is it so freaking hard to understand? Why is it so problematic? Well, free will. The Lord gave us free will. I'm sorry, what? I need better information with which to exercise my free will choice. So why would things be vague on purpose because of free will? It's the stupidest, one of the stupidest arguments I've heard in the defense of God's not intervening or doing anything divine. The nature of miracles. Long time ago, God, he parted the Red Sea. And he stopped the sun in the sky, and he raised Lazarus from the dead. These days, God simply had the police officer get out of the driver's side of the car before a semi-truck turned his vehicle into a crushed soda can. Oh, the Lord works in mysterious ways. He wanted to intervene more than he did, but it's a sinful world. Jesus wants to save the babies that are stillborn. The Lord wants this child over here not to have brain cancer. The Lord wants so-and-so not to be abused by a domestic partner. The Lord wants the Catholic Church not to rape children. The Lord wants, but he just can't because it is a fallen world and we have to have free will. I can feel the brain cells just dying in my skull. I just can't take it. The Lord would like to be divine and do divine shit, but free will. Anyway, that's what I've been feeling. And the more they argue in defense of this God, the more you realize how problematic the arguments are. They are actually pushing people further away. And a lot of it is just ad hominems, right? You go after the messenger. I'm sorry that your brain damaged. Or someone else said, who hurt you? As if that's an argument. Who hurt you? Why are you so mad at God? I hear that quite a bit, I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to totally get introduced to the true version of our faith, because no one who is introduced to the true version of Christianity would ever walk away. There are so many moving goalposts, and for that reason, I don't often engage, but I felt that it was important to, draw a circle around one of the problems in a public forum, especially on a taxpayer-funded law enforcement page. These are cops, and they're paid by all of the tax dollars within the town that they serve. And they shouldn't be acting like a church. And if they're going to sermonize, I think it's important that they should be challenged. And so I took it upon myself to do so. So anyway, that's just a window into what I've been up to recently. Have you noticed when you engage people, even good people who mean well, they will say the stupidest stuff? Which is why my most recent book is titled after one of my more recent speeches called Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot. Yes, I used to be guilty of it. We can all be dumb about some stuff, but Christianity, fundamentalist religions train you to think you are being deep and rich in wisdom and all these things, when in truth, you just sound like an idiot. I had somebody in the chat bring up a salient point about free will. I think we may have made this point on the show before, but it's so good. And I think one of the reasons it's so good is to watch the responses, the expressions on the believers' faces as you bring up this point. You say, okay, well, what you're saying is that our fall from grace is a product of free will, but that fall has produced kind of a decline of nature. All of nature has then fallen. So it's not just that humankind is being punished, but now we see animals that eat each other alive, and volcanoes that explode and cover living things in lava, and they burn to death horribly, and people are born with terrible birth defects, and good people are faced with terrible, nightmarish calamity in this world on a minute-by-minute basis. But that happens because humankind has free will, the will to choose. Is that what you're saying? Yes, we have free will, we chose poorly, and then shit happened. Okay. So is there any bad in heaven? Is there murder, birth defects, natural disasters, calamity, whatever, and any malice and pain and horribleness, any of that going on that we're seeing on earth? Will we see that in heaven? No, of course not. Heaven is perfect bliss. Heaven is absolute joy with nothing negative in it. What this means is then, with your model, by your measuring stick, you are saying that we will have no free will in heaven. Because on earth, free will produces a byproduct of bad decisions. Somebody chooses poorly, calamity takes place. But if that doesn't happen in heaven, it means we must not have the ability to make a choice, right or wrong. We don't have free will in heaven. And then they do a little song and dance. It sounds something like this. They're like, no, you obviously don't know Jesus. You don't know how Jesus works. Jesus is beyond our pithy insect brains. He's perfect. He's omnipotent. He can create any scenario and make it make sense. So in heaven, he can guarantee nothing bad ever happens, and you never do or think or say anything terrible. But at the same time, you will never do or say or think anything terrible, and it will be your own choice not to do so. So he'll force it, but it'll be your choice. And he'll make it all work because Jesus. I've tried to press people on this point about free will. If you don't have the freedom to decide for yourself, to fail even, you don't have freedom. And if you don't have freedom, you are a slave. Heaven is a slave camp. Oh yeah, bring it up. Watch their heads explode. I don't know. Let's talk about what you want to talk about for a while. Let's take some calls. 920, first on the switchboard. Who's this?
My name's Matt.
Matt, what's on your mind?
The topic I wanted to call about was virtue signaling. There's a lot of people on social media, and I am by and large one of them, who share things that they support. And it seems like I'm just sharing it with a bunch of people who agree with me. And I just don't know if there's any utility. And I'm starting to ask myself, is there any utility in sharing, to all these people, hey, I'm against this and I support that?
I think it's important for us to be true and public about our values. And I think social media can be a legitimate way of allowing ourselves as citizens, as human beings, etc., to be seen and heard. I think there are some people that may spend a lot of time on social media because they think they might be helpless to do anything else. Maybe they've told themselves, this is how you change the world. 15 posts a day talking about how shitty people are. There's some of that going on. And yeah, I do think there is virtue signaling where people aren't just about the things that matter, but seem to be puffing themselves up a little bit too much. They enjoy being superior just a little bit too much. They tend to vilify others just a little bit too much. And look at all the sycophants who come in behind them to say how noble and virtuous you are. I mean, that's a drug. It's addictive. And I have seen people who will even weaponize a worthy cause, but they do it to make themselves feel better about themselves. Yeah, I think that's a legitimate concern.
I don't know if you coined that term or not, but I'll give you credit, the slacktivist term. I really like that.
I read it somewhere, and I get it. I've been guilty of it. I see the revolution going on in Iran as the women are rising up and demanding freedom, often at their own peril. They're being blinded. They're being beaten to a pulp. They're being murdered in the streets. They're being murdered behind the scenes in prison cells, interrogation rooms. People over there doing genuinely brave things to try to revolutionize this backward country dominated by the Islamist regime. And so if I go on the Thinking Atheist pages, I will post about what is happening. Here is a story, an instance, an anecdote, a statistic. This is a news report that's come out. Here's video that is leaked. People need to know. So I'm able to signal boost in that way, which is legitimate and important. And the hashtags can catch on, raising more awareness, which can increase public pressure. So maybe that causes world governments to get involved. We saw this with a refugee out of, I'm trying to remember what she was coming out of, but she feared for her life. She was holed up in a hotel room, and yet it was social media and the hashtagging and the sharing that actually caused world governments to intervene, and she was able to get asylum in Canada, saved her life. So that's legitimate. But once I hashtag and share, what else have I done? Did I call the embassy? Did I contact my local officials so that they would call an embassy? Have I done anything else? And it's so freaking messy. I just feel like we can't lie to ourselves and think that ranting on Twitter is how we change the world. I am not convinced that is the case at all. There's got to be more. There's got to be more.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I am very grateful that people can, in a matter of seconds or minutes, raise awareness about something, but don't stop with the posting and don't stop with the resharing.
I want to thank one of my commenters in the chat. Rahaf Muhammad was the name of the woman who was rescued. Do I think there are some people who go online and they'll throw something out, maybe unfairly vilify an ideological opponent, or they're a binary thinker, or maybe they're just full of themselves. And so this is their way of feeling superior, announcing that they are a superior thinker. I'm a rationalist. I am better in a lot of ways. I run into those people. I've run into them in religious circles. I've run into them in atheist circles, and they can be just nasty. And I honestly think some of them They just knock everybody else down so they can feel taller. I am not a fan of those people, and I've muted a lot of accounts because I don't think that's how we change the world, and I'm certainly not here to feed anybody else's ego. But it's point by point, situation by situation. I think we're all doing the best we can, and I think you draw a circle around a legitimate challenge of trying to be an activist of any kind in the social media world. Thanks for calling, my friend, and have a wonderful day, okay?
You too. Take care, Andrew. Bye-bye.
See you later. It really is a cheap way. Sometimes it can be a cheap way of feeling like we're doing something. I've spoken about this. I've done whole speeches about how, I used to pat myself on the back and I go, yeah, tweeted about that. Yeah, showed them how it is. I have activisted today. Now I can go off and walk the dogs and take Natalie to the movies, and I can live my relatively, very privileged life as other people are going through true oppression. Aren't I special? I've been guilty. You get high, especially when somebody else comes in and likes and shares and comments and validates you. That's high. You get a chemical rush from that. There's an addictive aspect to social media. So it all feeds on itself. And by the end of the day, you feel like a world changer. For what? Sitting at your keyboard going, I have angry typed this world into a more reasonable place. You are welcome, everybody. 502, hi. Tell me your name.
Beth.
Hi, Beth. Thanks for calling. What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about therapy, abuse, and exploitation. I'm highly grateful that while President Obama was still in office, he had a public comment line that the citizens could call. And if it weren't for President Obama, I may already be deceased. People on his comment line gave me information about an organization, a group. There's a group of people across this country who dedicate themselves to trying to assist people who have been extremely harmed through therapy, abuse, and exploitation. Having me attacked by religious figures, people that imagine themselves to be puritanical and holy and all-knowing, put me and my entire family under attack. I've been stalked, mocked, hit by a stranger, falsely accused, sexually harassed, terrorized, issued death threats. I was literally told by a prayer line worker on Trinity Broadcasting Network's prayer line, you can get murdered.
Okay, well, I'm going to interject real quick, if you will. If you will, forgive me.
That's okay.
You're speaking about a lot without a lot of detail, and I understand why. Let me try to are we distilling this down to, in the healthcare industry, there's a heavy religious influence filled with blaming and shaming, often putting those seeking therapy in danger. Would that be a way to sum that up?
I would say that that's very accurate. Okay. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're sounding the alarm about what religiosity infecting what should be science-based mental health care?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Have you found a resource? Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, my only resource is through this group, and this in particular individual in this group who has 51 years of medical experience. If it weren't for her communicating with me now for over 6 years, I might already have died. And if it were up to a lot of individuals who consider themselves to be Christians, consider themselves as being children of God, if it were up to those individuals, I would have already died. They've used spiritual torturing of me to the point that they literally murdered my belief in God. I had been a believer, and I'm no longer a believer. I now am an atheist. The insanity I feel that exists within organized religion is so, there's so much tyranny, so much brutality, so much inhumanity.
Well, you draw a circle around a legitimate issue out there, and I'm glad you're still with us. And I appreciate the fact that you are sounding the alarm, blowing the whistle on this kind of thing, and that you have found someone to be able to confide in and maybe receive counsel from. And your call is greatly appreciated. So before I move on, just thank you, and I'm glad you're still here, okay?
Thank you so much, Seth.
All right, we'll see you later. Thank you. Bye. There are a lot of religious people who engage in therapy, who do not project their religiosity into mental health and helping their patients. Yet there are also many who believe that therapy is their mission field. And so the Secular Therapy Project is a resource. They heavily vet therapists, religious or not, to make sure that they are using science-based best practices to help other people in their journey. And there's a whole web page for them, seculartherapy.org. And I know a lot of people wish they had that in their journeys before it was established. I think it was established 6-7 years ago, seculartherapy.org. And hopefully that will help someone else. 512, hi. What's your name?
Ethan.
Thanks for calling. Ethan, what's on your mind?
Well, I had a couple of things that I wanted to get your opinion on. Right now, I think I'm big into TikTok and barely on Twitter at all, but the bigger threat I perceive is things like the Seven Mountains Mandate, Dominion theology. These people are end times Christians whose sole purpose is to turn America into a Christian theocracy for the purpose of bringing about the rapture, the second coming of Jesus. Jerry Falwell was one of them. They started a thing called the Council for National Policy, as well as other organizations you've probably heard of, including Project Blitz as a part of it. How do we counter stuff like that? I don't know if a vote is enough. Are we protesting? Are we continuing to raise our voice on social media? Like, how do you protest that kind of insanity?
All right. So the question is, how do we fix the world? All right, hang on. That may be a little bit above me, but but you and I share the same. You're right. Christian dominion theology, and there are a lot of layers to this onion. One, it is hell-bent, if you will, on making the rest of us second-class citizens. It wants the head seat of the table so it can dole out the scraps to the rest of us. It can shove it down our throat, and we're supposed to say, thank you very much. So much of it, I think, is about power. I think much of it is about trying to fulfill the book of Revelation. I think there is a lot of xenophobia because if we consolidate the United States with its subjectively drawn borders into a Christian nation, it is better prepared to defeat the one world government, which is also part of Christian end times theology. I think there are just some bigots out there that don't want to share this world. I think there's a ton of reasons that people are dominionist and want to have dominion over others, whether it's people of color or those who are non-hetero, or whether it's the Muslim or the Jew or the Sikh or the Hindu or the non-religious, the atheist, the Democrat, whatever. And so there's no one magic bullet for any of this, except I think resist. I think we have to stand up. We have to be strong. I think we have to let our voices be heard. I think we have to contact our elected officials. I think we need to be seen in the public eye. We are demographically on the rise. What's the number? 40% roughly of Americans now identify as pretty much non-religious. We just don't need it, don't want it, not necessarily atheists, but not engaged, certainly not interested in a theocracy over democracy model. Well, whenever possible, we need to be out. We got to show the world we're here. We're growing in numbers. We will not be ignored. And these attacks on the rule of law, the Constitution, basic human decency simply won't be tolerated. And I think that can manifest in a great many ways beyond the vote. I think, whether we're appearing at a city council meeting, we are contacting our congressperson, putting together events or protests or some sort of a media attraction that local news stations or regional news stations might be interested in. I think we got to do more of that. We have to be seen and heard, and that's the best I've got.
Well, it's something that I've tried to push for on TikTok is getting more people to run at local elections, local things, because Democrats don't tend to do that. That's, Republicans kind of see it, Christian conservatives kind of see it as an American responsibility to be involved and engaged at the political level. And so now we're seeing school boards and city councils, mayorships go to Republicans where, like, in a state where maybe they have Democratic Congress and Senate. And so, like, we're getting in book bans and all this other stuff. And you mentioned something else. I spend a lot of time defending my community, the LGBTQ community, on TikTok and social media. And one of the hardest conversations I tend to have with these types of thinkers is I've actually gone to like the American Academy of Pediatrics and American Academy of Psychology, and I've read published papers about gender dysphoria and what it means to transition and what the best standards and practices are. And no matter how many times I try to drive home that point, cite those sources, give the available details, all I ever get back from these people is, well, that's just liberal propaganda. All the science that impacts their life on a daily basis, from their communications, their entertainment, their transportation, clothing, housing, food, you name it, they're okay with all of that. But when scientists say that a brain can develop in a different way, suddenly they don't believe that science, and you can't get it through to these people. They don't care if it's true. They don't want to believe it.
Or they believe that they have the truth and they have been programmed to distrust all disconfirming information. It's like when I go out and talk about Noah's Ark. I'm going to take a leap here. But I'm like, you realize the entire geologic column refutes any idea, any notion, any claim about a global flood. This never happened. And their response is not, wow, show me the geologic column. I would like to see the sedimentary layers and understand better the evidence that you are bringing. They don't do that. What they say is, well, of course, scientists want the Bible to not be true because they worship science or Einstein, or they're selfish or want to be gods, or they're agents of the devil, right? So they are more interested in defending ideology than embracing education. This is often programmed from their earliest years. And we can all be guilty of ideology defense, of being closed-minded, of doubling down. But certainly religions foster that. But it doesn't mean we don't continue to bring the evidence and show the truth, because I think there are a few doubters out there who do want to know and who are dissatisfied with the party line and who want to evolve their thinking. Hell, I became one of them, and it transformed my life. You may have been another one of them. It is possible. So I think we continue to pound the drum of science, education, reason, data, and humanity. That's all I got, okay?
I understand that entirely. Like, even doing what I do on TikTok, I get comments and messages from people who tell me that I gave them a pause to think about things. And in some cases, people will tell me that I was what started their deconstruction. Now, I'm nowhere near a loud as voice as you are, but I try to do what I can. I did have one more question before I get off the call. Do we meet unkindness with kindness? Is that the goal? At what point do we get to push back in fire with fire kind of attitude? When do we get to stop being nice to people who want to see us cease to exist? And then I will get off the phone and let you answer that.
I'll answer this off air.
Yeah. I really do appreciate.
All right. Thanks for calling. Right. Good call. I appreciate you very much. I don't think you can say for everyone that you use the same approach. There have been people who have a bad idea, a destructive idea, that they are offering up, honestly, with good intention. Maybe they're just brainwashed, or, they've been locked into the Fox News culture or some sort of a fundy faith or whatever. But you can see in them, they genuinely believe this is good and this is right and this is the moral thing to do. So I think I have to gauge intent. Are they just awful people? Are they just poisonous in their mind, heart, and gut? And they're going out and just doing hideous things because they are hideous people. Well, I'm going to approach them a lot differently, especially publicly, than I would approach somebody who was a fundamentalist believer, who may have homophobic beliefs, or who may be a young earth or anti-science creationist or something like that. I think I approach differently, whether it's the one-on-one or whether it's the broad stage. I use mockery a lot more on the larger macro level. If I meet somebody who has some problematic ideas, who may be part of the Christian nation crowd, but I know in their heart they're good people trying to live good lives, and we have a conversation over coffee, that's a lot different than me condemning 60 Minutes for platforming Marjorie Taylor Greene on what used to be a blue chip, reputable bastion of investigative reporting. Marjorie Taylor Greene gets no quarter from me. and I will put her on blast, right? I will nuke her from orbit. But it's situational. And even some of the worst ideas that are propagated by what we see as some of the worst people, some of those people can be changed. Remember, they're propagators of bad ideas, but in many instances, they're also victims of bad ideas. And I know a lot of my fellow lefties hate when I say this. Well, they're not victims, they're perpetrators. They're dominators. They're evil. They're my enemy. Well, maybe they are your enemy. Maybe they're my enemy. It's like when, and this is really controversial, okay? When the terrorists fly planes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on 9/11. They are the perpetrators of Islamic fundamentalist hate, wiping out thousands of innocent lives. This deserves our condemnation. Fundamentalist Islam deserves the terrorists, those involved in the beheadings and the torture and the misogyny, they deserve our condemnation. They must be resisted. We have to stand up, and with all force, we have to say, no, we won't live in this world, this bigoted, destructive, cruel, primitive, barbaric culture that you want the whole world to look like. We refuse, right? That's a strong stance. Where did the mindset that you must fly a plane into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon to wipe out the infidel and achieve paradise with Allah, where did that come from? That's brainwashing. Somebody was so brainwashed, so programmed with fundamentalist superstition, bigotry, and hate that they were willing to blow themselves and all these other people up in the name of their God. If you look at it in that respect, this person probably brainwashed from childhood who never had a chance. They are a perpetrator. They are also a victim. And there are some people who have been talked out of their hate, out of their bigotry. They have been engaged out of their bad ideas. They have been loved out of their hate. I know some people hate it when I say that out loud. Who's that guy who goes, he's a black gentleman, he goes and he engages member of the KKK. He goes and talks to white supremacists. He's talked white supremacists out of their hate, and they've become dear friends. Right? It's possible. I used to be anti-gay. I used to be all this awful stuff. I was xenophobic, and I thought all Muslims were terrorists. And I was a Christian nationalist dominionist. And I didn't think women should be able to control their bodies because it's God's decision. And the tiny little fertilized embryo, whatever it was, that's a baby. Right? It's a baby with a soul. So therefore, our word in the Christian faith trumps all. And so let's strip all the... I wasn't thinking of it in those terms. I was thinking we're advocates for the children. But the effect was we are going to rob 166 million American women from their right to choose what happens to their body. I was the enemy of reproductive rights. I was the enemy of the constitutional state church line. I was the enemy of non-Christians in that way. And I got rescued. If it's possible for me, maybe it's possible for other people. I was a perpetrator of bad ideas, also a victim of bad ideas. And in the non-binary world where people and issues are complex, these things can exist in the same space. Nuance cannot be dead when we talk about these things. Forgive the rant. I am so sorry. Chelsea at 252. Thanks for waiting on me. Are you there?
I am here.
Thanks for calling. What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about, I guess, the different tunes and what the past few calls were like. And one of them is actually related. I have religious chosen family. I'm part of the LGBT community. And my religious family is just the best family I could ever have, honestly. They're the most affirming, kind-hearted people I've ever had in my life. And they love me unconditionally. I was raised in, I wouldn't say far right, but right-leaning Methodist, very anti-LGBT and all that stuff. And the church has recently split, the Methodist Church. That's another topic for another day, but that's how I grew up. But when I started talking with my friend, who's now my sister, chosen sister, and I talked to her family, once I started talking with them about religion and all the trauma I've been through and all that, their narrative did not click with what I'm used to. They're preaching love, unconditional. They don't believe in hell per se. They believe you get to choose that when you die, whether you want to cease to exist or you just go with heaven to God. That's what their theology is like, but that's the end goal of that. But I'm going off on a tangent. I just wanted to say, I just recently got off the phone with my sis, and she is a chaplain over in Michigan. She is a secular chaplain, I would say. She is not what you would think a chaplain would be, honestly, because a chaplain is somebody who's religious and is there for religious therapy, but she doesn't pressure anyone into, she is understanding. Recently, we got off the phone and we talked about somebody who's non-binary and in class came to her and asked if she could talk to her professor because a student was proselytizing in class and the professor was not doing a good job at denouncing that or pushing back. So she set the professor down and changed the professor's mind. And professor, ever since then, the proselytizer has not spoken. Well, the proselytizer still has been, proselytizing, but there has been a lot of pushback since then.
Let me ask this. How old, if you want to share, how old is your chaplain sister?
Around 27.
Thank you. Right? 30 and under. Not interested in the fundy faiths of their parents and grandparents, moving away from hardline religiosity. And I'm seeing a lot more of this where people who are practicing Christianity are kind of custom fitting a Christianity which is distanced from the hardline scriptures. Their Christianity has a Jesus who loves and supports everybody unconditionally. And the anti-gay verses, those are out of there. And the hell theology, that we're going to get rid of that. And the misogyny and the silencing of women, no, let's have a female chaplain. Granted, I think they are manufacturing their own religion and calling it Christianity or a byproduct of Christianity, but it's the humanist. It's the human being in her and others like her, increasingly with the 30 and under crowd that are transforming this world, I think at the demographic level, beyond the halls of power where things have just gone batshit crazy, beyond the entrenched Christian dominionist types. But in the culture as a whole, we're becoming less fundy, more secular, more humanist. And I think your sister is an example of that. A chaplain who is essentially preaching humanity.
Yeah, and I thought that kind of tied off with the second to last caller or third to last caller, the one that was talking about therapy abuse. Mm-hmm. It made me think about that. So I wanted to also include something about my sister being a chaplain and stuff and how secular and humanist she is.
It's a good point. And it's also, I think, a reminder that we can't put all religious people in a freaking box. We're back to don't be a binary thinker. People are monumentally complex, and I think there are a lot of good people who have custom fitted a religion that best suits their moral code, and they don't want to be a bigot. They don't want to judge. They want to love and make the world a better place. They're still sort of affected by a religious model. Your sister inspires me in that way, and I'm thankful for her, and I appreciate you telling us about her, okay?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, Chelsea.
Have a great day.
Be good. We'll see you later. At this moment, I'm thinking about Greta Vosper. She is a minister. She went into Christian ministry for United Church back in 1993. This is in Canada. And over the course of several years, she began to deconstruct and say, this is not making any sense. The dogma, the fundamentalist scriptures, the Bible, a lot of the theology. No, I'm not buying this. And so she started to edge away from that stuff, and she preached more humanism. Finally came clean to the whole congregation. She just told her church, no longer believe in a supernatural, involved, personal God. I just don't. And she somehow remained a minister, and then the United Church and her had a dispute, and they went through a bunch of stuff, which is not really the point. The point is that she remains a minister, right? She's still a minister. And if you had seen that on paper, if you had seen the title in a brochure, on a poster, in a news article, and it said, Minister Greta Vosper, our instinct is to say, oh, great, another brainwashed Christian who's spreading hate and bigotry based on the Bible, right? We immediately knee-jerk in that direction. We don't take the time to turn the page and read the biography of a minister who became less about theology and more about humanity. And interestingly, I think this was 6-7 years ago, she did this interview with CBC television. And she estimated that around half of all of the clergy in the United Church don't believe in a supernatural God. Now, granted, hers is a subjective opinion. She did have an inside-out kind of a look at the culture, so it's obvious she bumped into a lot of pastors and ministers who were kind of doing the same thing she was, right? I'm a minister, but, let's talk about something besides the Bible. Let's talk about charity. Let's talk about kindness. Let's talk about lifting up each other's arms in times of need and meeting needs and loving our fellow human beings regardless of who they are and where they come from and what the color of their skin is and what their sexual identity is. We are all the human race. We are all brothers and sisters. This is humanism. These are progressive pastors preaching humanism. Greta Vosper and her ilk are on our team. Labels matter, titles matter, but they are not always the story. Just remember that next time you bump into a minister. We're far from done. So much good stuff to talk about. We will do so next. Hang on. If you would like to support your humble host and this broadcast and help me to do what I do, become a patron. Patrons get their own separate RSS feed if they want it, which gives them a totally commercial-free broadcast, and it releases a couple of days early. And you can be a patron at whatever level that you want, $1, $4 a month, whatever. I mean, it's up to you. But it does matter. It does make a difference. And I thank you so much for your support. Patreon.com/Seth Andrews. 412. I've got Eric. What's up?
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I've been listening to your podcast and watching your videos, and as I was watching them, I keep thinking about times with my father, who has been gone, left us earth a while ago now. But when I was living with him, when I was living at home, with him, he always confused me because he always seemed to flip-flop between believing in God and religion and all that to going into logic and say, wait a minute, I'm reading this in the Bible, and that doesn't make sense. It's like throughout his life, he keeps flip-flopping through that, talking to me about it. And I often wondered if you've ever experienced anybody like that who seemed to flip-flop, and it's almost like he had some sort of split personality when he had to that. I remember one time when he would, at one point, tell me a story about something he heard about how there's a lot of similarities to what the Aborigines believe and how it related to a known Christian story. But then a week later read something in the Bible and say, hey, look at this. Does this make sense to you? This doesn't jive with me. It is something that he does. It's like he seems to think logically about this sort of thing on one level. But then, a month later, he's watching Touched by an Angel on a regular basis. But it was hard to know whether my father truly believed this stuff or if he was curious about it. Would it be safe to say that even my father was, for lack of a better way of putting it, lost?
Well, I'm not a psychologist. It sounds like someone who's, I hate the word seeker because the church likes to use that word.
Right.
But, you're kind of flying around and you see a cue and you respond to it. And then you see something else and that repels you. And then you turn the other direction and this gives you comfort. And then you go over here and you're influenced by someone else who may say something that's interesting or might even make sense in the moment. But then you see disconfirming evidence. I don't know what his tool set is for trying to determine what is and isn't true. It sounds like a very emotional journey to me where someone, though, is legitimately seeking and not intimidated by or too worried about doubt. Sounds like your father's entertained doubt, which is better than many people do.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, you just helped me. It just occurred to me, and you're right. I mean, he never preached at me, which was good. And both my parents say they don't like to be preached at. My father has been raised or lowered, maybe you could say, by nuns. And he had a lot of hilarious stories he told me about nuns and then the stuff that happened at school. I mean, one time when he saw a nun for the first time, he thought that they had no feet because they always seemed to be floating in the hallways. There was no feet, got no feet. And that cracked me up.
Nuns with no feet. That sounds like an indie band, by the way. Tomorrow in concert, it's Nuns with No Feet
like an indie band.
at the Cain's
Nuns
Ballroom.
With no feet.
Yeah.
We got to write that down. Nuns with no feet. But you know what? I will say that it still made me feel better hearing you say that because, I mean, look, you're right. Humans are messy, and it's always going to be the case. I just wish we would learn to not really try to over-straighten or over-correct ourselves, if you will. Yeah. But I guess that's a pipe dream.
I think let's try to sharpen each other. It sounds like a Hallmark movie, but I really believe it. We can go out and challenge each other in ways,
bad that we have to
ways.
compare ourselves with brand names.
Let's go out and, let's try to sharpen each other and nudge each other toward better ideas. You never know what might happen. Eric, appreciate you very much. Thanks for calling.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you later. I have met those people that seem to sample at the buffet of belief. They'll go over here and they grab a little nugget because that's tasty from this religion or cult or faith tradition or spiritism. And they'll come over here and go, oh, yeah, in Christianity, that's a great teaching. Let's grab that. Jesus said some beautiful stuff in this chapter and we'll grab that. And over here, look, it's Jainism or Buddhism or what. Oh, that's a wonderful philosophy. So they just sort of assemble all these things. The ingredients are on the plate, all the different items, and they eat them in the order that they want and maybe mix up some various foods because the flavor combination is palatable to them. I mean, this is what people do. A lot of people do. And I find that's telling. They're out there trying to find something that fits them, what's going on in their mind, in their heart, in their bones, in their character. And it says a lot about human beings. They have a need to believe, but they also want to be true to their own moral center, their own moral code. And so they custom fit a religion that echoes them, for better and worse. 971. I've got Mark.
Hello.
What's up?
I'm one of those vacation Bible school survivors. I was, as a kid, like I think it was in the 4th grade. It was a summer. We saw flyers in the neighborhood. Come to the vacation Bible school. So my sister and I, she's a year and a half younger than me, and we both went. And that's how I ended up becoming an evangelical. And it was, at the time, it seemed like it was a nice experience. But as some of your guests have pointed out, it's a very attractive thing to parents because it's 2 weeks. You can get the kids out of the house for half a day or whatever, and they seem to like it. But we did that, and then just the kids ended up attending the local evangelical church 4 doors down from us. And it was a weird situation where you had 2 kids who were active in the evangelical church, and yet their parents were not believers. And that kind of caused a lot of tension. It was hard. You're getting one message from the pulpit and from the Sunday school with a very conservative Christian viewpoint, and then my home was more liberal. We're Democrats. The whole congregation were Republicans. This is right about the time Reagan was in his ascendancy. So I think I had to kind of live with some contradictions. and was a member of the church all through high school until I got to college, and then I just kind of slowly drifted away. And people ask me, was there one thing that did it? And I'd say, well, I think just over a period of time, I started to see that life was not black and white, and there's a lot of shades of gray out there.
Why do you call yourself a Vacation Bible School survivor? Flesh that out for me. No, I mean, I get it. I totally get it. I just want to hear it in your words. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, because I went through that experience, but, I look back and I know what they said, what scripts they're following. Their idea is to bring kids into the church. And yes, in a lot of ways they were successful. They were successful in the short term, but eventually I moved out of that. It's not that I renounced my faith all at once, but I slowly stopped believing it.
Well, I want to camp out here, if you'll forgive the phrasing. Camp out.
Oh, please do.
Were the flyers pitching, hey, come out, the kids will get canoeing and hiking and crafts and fun and games and make new friends? Did they focus on, the camp aspect more than the church aspect? Because that's what a lot of them do.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I mean, we didn't have canoeing, but we had everything else. We had craft time and snacks and meet new friends and all of that. Oh, yeah.
There was a local one here, Falls Creek, and they would have all of that. And yet you had to attend a church service 3 times a day. There was a morning service just as soon as you had breakfast, and then there was a midday, and then there was an evening. For, I think, 2 weeks, every day, 3 church services a day. Did you have a regimen to go and worship or praise or be taught or discipled or whatever?
Yeah, we had that. It was, of course, in someone's backyard, and, we were on picnic tables and so on. But it was essentially that kind of message.
Were you memorizing verses? Were they training you to evangelize?
Yes, we were.
I mean, flesh it out for me. I'm just curious.
We were learning verses and learning little Bible stories and the whole thing. Yes, you're absolutely right.
So programming, I mean, is that an overreach if I say you were being programmed?
I think that's a pretty good way to put it, yeah. I'll buy that for $1.
RoboCop reference. All right, now you and I bonded. You and I, as 80s and 90s children, have bonded. That's awesome. You draw a circle around one of the more insidious aspects of child ministries. It's almost like when there's a local church downtown and they tell parents, hey, we would like to send a bus into your neighborhood, put your kids out front, we'll pick them up, we're going to take them to church, and they're going to get games and fun and friends and a free lunch out of the deal. Well, weary parents who've been working their asses off, who would love a break, go, well, that sounds nice, and it's church, that'll be benign. So they put their kids out front, and they send them off to go frolic and make friends and have fun, not necessarily cognizant of the fact that in order to have all of the good stuff, games and food and candy and whatever, they have to sit through an evangelical sermon that warns them about hell and asks them to come forward, drop to their knees, and accept Jesus into their heart. It's really insidious, and a lot of child-based ministries do that kind of thing, and your story is yet another example, and I'm glad you were able to escape, because I know that's not always easy.
No, it's not. And you're absolutely right. You hit that, and you've had some guests on your show that have talked about the same thing, so
yeah.
Absolutely. I am living proof of that one way or the other.
You're free. You're liberated. Not by the blood of the lamb. You just sort of did it on your own. But I think that has a lot more meaning. Mark, you're awesome. Thanks for calling the show, man.
Thank you, sir.
All right. We'll see you later.
Anytime, brother.
We've got a show on vacation. Was it Vacation Bible School or child-based ministries? We've covered it, but I think we did a whole show on Christian summer camps. So if you want to filter through the archives, I know I have 600 plus shows, but I think if you just Google search or go to Spreaker or iTunes podcast or whatever, Apple podcast, and search The Thinking Atheist Christian Summer Camp, I think it should pop up. But we did a whole show exposing some of the more insidious methods that these organizations use. They wink at parents and say fun and games when they get the kids in and control the environment. Then it's all about theology and doctrine and brainwashing. You are amazing. Thanks for listening. Join me on the next show as I have Noah Lugeons, host of The Scathing Atheist. We are going to talk about Christian video games on the show. Oh, you thought the Christian movies were bad. The video games may be even worse. And I'm going to talk to somebody who has researched decades of this stuff. That is coming up on the next show. In the meantime, take care, and I will see you then.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter for a complete archive of podcasts and videos, products like mugs and t-shirts featuring the Thinking Atheist logo, links to atheist pages and resources, and details on upcoming Free Thought events and conventions. Log on to our website, thethinkingatheist.com.